And before you get into your presentation, can you briefly introduce yourself? Yes, thanks so much. I'm Frank Foligno. This is my name sign. I am a WFD board member. And before I get started, I wanted to let you know that primarily, I work in international sign language. So for this presentation, I will do my best to present it with ASL, but you may see that I mix some signs and the two together. So I'm a WFD board member, and I've been on the board for the last 5 years. Primarily, my role is to do with financing and oversight of the finances for the organization. I was previously president of the Canadian Association of the Deaf and did a lot of advocacy in my role there, and then subsequently have now moved to WFD as a board member. And I'm now working in that capacity, representing deaf people from around the globe with the work that WFD does. So really looking forward to getting to share some of the information I have tonight to talk about the rights of deaf children and how being able to have a deaf identity is essential to a deaf child growing up happy and healthy. And I'll just get my PowerPoint presentation up here. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of WFD in general. So WFD has been around for 70 years and has been focused on advocating for human rights globally, I should add. WFD was founded in 1951, and originally the first meeting was in Rome, Italy, and then our conferences have moved around the year since then. We are now headquartered in Helsinki, Finland, and there's a number of staff that work around the globe for WFD, focusing on advocacy and ensuring that rights of deaf people are respected. We also have a Congress, and there are over 130 members in our Congress. And of course, one of those members is the Canadian Association of the Deaf. We have been advocating for rights for deaf people, and we've also been working with other disability-focused organizations to advocate. And we are one of the oldest organizations that has been doing advocacy work. Through our work, we've established our vision, what we want to see for deaf people around the globe, and what we want to see as a world where deaf people everywhere can sign anywhere. So that really means that they can go out somewhere, they're able to access that service or conduct their business in sign language, and that can happen anywhere in the world. The deaf people all around the globe have that right to access services and be able to communicate in sign language. So it really goes back to that sign language is a right, and that people, no matter where they are, should be able to interact and live their daily life with sign language being their mode of communication. That vision links into our action plan, which is a 5-year plan from 2023 to 2027. And we have our strategic plan that guides the work that we are doing as WFD so that our staff knows where we're headed and they can work towards achieving those goals. So it's both our board and our staff that work towards achieving these goals and accomplishing our strategic initiatives and the plan. And then we can bring that to our General Assembly every 4 years and review the plan, the actions that we've taken. And we also have a 2023 to 2033 strategic initiative that lays out more long-term plans of what we are working towards, and that sets long-term vision for the organization. You can scan that QR code that you see on this PowerPoint here, and then you're able to look at this document in more information. It is available on our website via that QR code. So that's a little bit of a discussion about WFD. Now moving into more of our topic for tonight, the right for deaf children's rights. So it is a right to access sign language, and that sign language is the right of a deaf child. A deaf child must have the right to access and use sign language, be provided with it, and then grow up with that as an option available for them, and that it is an inherent right that they have those options available. I'm going to show this video, and it was an announcement of the rights of deaf children that originally happened in 2023 at the WFD Congress. It was the General Assembly meeting that we had. A number of representatives joined at that Congress, and then out of that came this declaration on the rights of deaf children. So I'll show you this video now. It is really an exciting video. It really lays out some important groundwork, this declaration, and it's just a couple of minutes that we'll take to watch it now. Oh, and there is also captioning on the video as well. I should mention that. And it is in International Sign Language. So I'll get it started here. So as you can see in that video, these are all deaf children from around the world talking about the Declaration for the Rights to Sign Language and going through the different articles that are in that declaration. And countries are able to sign on to this declaration, and there's advocacy for governments to work towards bringing this declaration and all articles that are contained within it into fruition so that all children have access to sign language and no one is deprived of that right. That way, deaf children will have a full language that they can access, being sign language. At the bottom of that declaration, there's a QR code. I hope that you will be able to scan it and you can bring that forward and partake in some of this advocacy work to ensure that deaf kids have access to a sign language. So from the Declaration on the Rights for Deaf Children, we do have a position paper that goes along with it. And it's the right to sign language for families of deaf children. And this position paper focuses particularly on the fact that deaf children have a right to access sign language and have sign language provided to them, and how families can be involved in that as well to ensure that they have communication with their children in sign language. Again, there is a QR code on this slide. You're welcome to scan it and you can take a look. There is a video in International Sign Language on the website as well, talking about this position paper. And I'm going to pull sections from this position paper in the subsequent slides of my presentation and talk more about it. So the first point in Article 1 is that deaf children have the right to sign language. And realizing this right is an essential for their achievement, and it's a right for their education, their health, and their well-being. As 95% of deaf children are born to hearing families, their language rights are enabled through the provision of sign language support to both children and their families or carers from birth, so that that family can communicate and that child can be raised in an environment that is ASL using. Therefore, children will be born like all other humans, born free and equal in dignity and their rights. So all deaf children have a right to fluent national sign language models, which includes their teachers in education. When deaf teachers are teaching in a sign language, deaf children are able to understand that language and develop it. Without the provision of that language, that would be a violation of their right to access sign language. We see the impacts of language deprivation and what that can do to someone's life, their ability to learn. It has widespread impacts on the services they receive, the work that they'll be able to do, and sign language being provided to them is a right which will avoid language deprivation. So WFD has made this recommendation at the Congress that there be recognition that a national sign language are a health need and a right for deaf children and their families or carers from early childhood onwards. So this is wanting to implement legislation and policies and in the public service that sign language will be provided and is made accessible to deaf children and their families so that that instruction in sign language is available. And like previously talked about, that education is delivered in a national sign language. Additionally, that as folks head out into the world, they're able to interact in sign language, and parents or carers are able to support their kids in sign language and to access services that way. So we're wanting to see legislation where there currently isn't any, that this be a requirement. And that is some of the advocacy work that we're doing to ensure that kids have access to sign language. An additional recommendation is that families or carers have unconditional access to free deaf-led sign language services and specialized sign language classes from infancy onward. And it's important that that be deaf-led services so that there's deaf role models for the deaf kids to look up to and develop that sense of identity. It's incredibly powerful for a deaf kid to see a deaf adult performing their role in society and working. That's very empowering and gives them a sense that they can achieve and work towards their goals. So this is provision of classes in sign language to ensure that families and deaf children are able to access language, and it should be led by deaf instructors. A key point that we wanted to raise is that all parents, carers, and family members of deaf children must be provided with free instruction in their national sign language so that the family can reap the benefits of multilingualism for their deaf children. So that needs to be encouraged and provided for free. There are a number of challenges we see in different regions in the world as far as getting access to services like this, and that is something we are working on and wanting to have deaf individuals available and able to teach. There are a number of systemic barriers that we see in the global south, and we are working on breaking down those barriers. We do see more access in the global north. However, we do recognize that in different regions, there are different barriers and challenges, but regardless, the endpoint is that there is access to sign language and that support is available for these deaf children. Another recommendation that we thought was very important is that healthcare providers and early intervention services should be trained on the importance of sign language in early childhood. They need to be aware of the benefits of having sign language provided to deaf children. And there needs to be a connection with the deaf community. In the advocacy work that deaf people are doing, it needs to be viewed from a healthcare provider lens and ensure that there's policies in place so that when families will go to their doctor and they have a deaf child, there are resources that are provided and information shared with the families that reflects that of the deaf community. And that there is the opportunity to connect with the deaf community through various organizations and associations, that they are aware that there's a community out there that they can connect with, a sign language using community to help them build their fluency and ensure that their deaf child has access in sign language. And to ensure that their child is equipped with the necessary tools and resources to have a career and move through their life happy and healthily. It's also very important that the number of other declarations that are out there from the UN and other organizations reinforce this in a more general way. So it's important that that information also be shared and it also be available and that folks are aware of it so that they know there are these other declarations out there that can be beneficial in their pursuits. So another key point is that deaf professionals and deaf role models play a pivotal role in supporting families and carers by enabling access to national and Indigenous sign languages and promoting the deaf community's linguistic and cultural identity. When a deaf child is raised with sign language, they are able to develop that cultural and linguistic identity, and it takes support to do that. So it's important that the deaf community be connected in a way that allows for that support to be given and that identity to be developed. when someone grows up and they have that sense of identity, they're able to partake in the deaf community, socialize with other deaf people, deaf professionals, and see deaf role models to reinforce their identity. So that's our vision, a world where deaf people everywhere can interact in sign language everywhere. So we see that starting with deaf children, being able to see deaf adults living that vision that we've already laid out and seeing that for themselves. And then developing identity and culture and growing into that vision as well. So another recommendation is to facilitate, enable, and support the involvement of deaf communities and deaf professionals in healthcare and early intervention services. We see that there's language deprivation happening, and WFD wanted to address this and bring together a team to ensure we had a quick response ready, so that if we ever saw situations where deaf children were deprived of language, that there would be resources available and ready for the deaf community and other professionals to respond and to support that family and that deaf child accessing sign language instruction and getting their right to access to instruction. We do see a number of different countries that are models of this, and we're working to take learnings from those different countries and the models they employ and working towards setting up some resources and having a quick response team-like approach so that families, parents, any carers are able to get services very quickly and we're able to get information to them right away. We see this very much as a quick response aid type service in areas that are experiencing wars. That kind of model is already set up. We want to parallel a model like that as a quick response model where services and information can be quickly sent in and support services can be provided. So that at any point, if a deaf child is identified as being language deprived or not having ready access to sign language, that their rights are then able to be respected, and we're able to support the respect of their rights with these resources to advocate and support professionals to ensure that they're getting access to sign language and that those families are able to connect with the community and receive the services, resources, and information they need. So everyone here today in Canada, if you are interested in signing on to the declaration and endorsing the declaration, you can scan this QR code. It will take you to the website and you're able to sign the declaration. That will get you a copy of the declaration, and you can also use that to advocate to government and to advocate for the articles that are listed in the declaration and ensure that policies are created to respect those articles and that we ensure deaf children have a right to sign language access and that they have a right to sign language and therefore growing up to be happy and healthy, and we no longer see deaf children experiencing language deprivation. So that is what we're working towards, and we ask you to work alongside of us as well so that deaf children everywhere have access to sign language. Additionally, if you're wanting to support the work that we do at WFD, you are able to support in a number of ways. One of them, of course, is to donate. That helps us to continue the work that we do, to continue to advocate, and to continue to focus on advocating at the UN and to international agencies and organizations. We work with these agencies and organizations to collect information and reports of what's happening around the world, any instances of language deprivation, look through the data that we collect and correlate that and summarize it so that we can bring it to the UN and make strong cases and arguments to the UN and international agencies and organizations that this is something that needs attention and that sign language is a right for deaf children. This also helps us in our work with advocating to various governments through our work at the UN. As everyone comes together at the UN in New York, we do have the opportunity to talk to various governments to advocate and explain the right and need for sign language access. So with that, I conclude my presentation. And finally, thank you very much.
All right, I'll just wait for Frank. Thank you so much. What a rich amount of information you've been able to provide us from the WFD perspective on the access to language and how language is so important. Thank you, Frank, so much for your time this evening. I'm sure there'll be a few questions for the Q&A, but I would like to turn things over to Richard from the Canadian Association for the Deaf. Thank you, Frank, for your time. We'll have you back in a little bit. Thank you so much. All right, we do have Richard, there you are with your camera. And Frank's got his pin taken off, so that's perfect. This is Richard Belleil. Richard, if you can give us a little bit of background about yourself and the role that you have, and then you can go ahead with your presentation. So I will turn my camera off. Hello, thank you so much for this warm welcome here tonight. I am here as a little bit of a surprise to myself this evening. Your presenter tonight should have been the President, Shauna Joint of CAD, the president of CAD ASC. Unfortunately, she's had a last minute emergency where she was unable to make it and asked me to come in tonight as her representative. So luckily, I had the evening free and I am able to present. I have had the opportunity to look through Shauna's PowerPoint, and I also have experience presenting as well. I am the executive director of CAD ASC and have been for the past 2.5 years now. So a little bit about our role at the CAD. We are advocating for the rights of deaf people in Canada. And it is an important role that looks at advocating for access. We look at the Accessible Canada Act and all that that entails. I know that for the federal government, they are writing new regulations right now around access, and those regulations are going to ripple out across the country and impact the lives of all Canadians. That being said, at the federal level, the federal jurisdiction has over certain companies and employment areas. That's where we're going to see the ripple effect first. One, like if we go back to the slides that Shauna has sent over, we think about all of the roles and advocacy that has happened under CAD ASC, working in partnership with other national organizations. We think about national healthcare and etc. So looking at the connections and the unified approach for advocacy, and that's part of this presentation tonight as well. So I'm trying to share my screen. And I'm so sorry, just give me one moment. Okay, I think we've got it right now. There you go. I'll start again. I started at the end. I apologize. Practicing how to move a PowerPoint back and forth on the Zoom. Anyway, here we are. This is our illustrious president, Shauna Joint, who sends her regrets at not being able to be here. She has just been an amazing role model, working tirelessly for the CAD ASC and just Canadians. Have a wonderful role model and advocate in her. She is bilingual in both written and sign languages. and has a strong advocacy for Indigenous sign languages here in Canada as well. So this is Shauna signing the Canadian Association of the Deaf. And then she signs it again in French, the Association des Sourds de Canada. And so we see that Canada is signed a little bit differently in ASL than it is in LSQ. And as I mentioned, Indigenous Sign Languages, here are 3 signed languages available to us in Canada, both ASL, LSQ, and one of the Indigenous Sign Languages of Canada. There are many. I believe in this video, it is Plains Sign Language. I am just going from memory on this one though. So hello, bonjour, and hot. One of the great things that we have recently been able to do at CAD-ASC is to get our website coordinated with the 360 ASL, and they're a company out of the USA, and they have joined with us to do some marketing with Eversea. And that is a French group who in Quebec who is providing some of this access. So if you go to our website, cadasc.ca, the page that you come up with, it's really tiny down here, but if you're able to click on that link, when you get this PowerPoint, we'll be able to bring up the website. And of course, then you can see multiple presentations. You can see different examples of sign language. So when you come to the CAD-ASC website, then you're able to click on each of these icons or pictures that you see, and it will come up more clearly in a larger frame, and you're able to see a deaf person, a live deaf person that you can actually chat with if you want to connect. There are recorded messages and there are individuals that you can actually connect with live and on demand. And so this is changing the landscape of how we connect with CAD-ASC, and that's only happened in the last month or so. Hopefully this is an opportunity to demonstrate to the Canadian government and governments across the country that this is what full inclusion and equality and accessibility services looks like for deaf individuals. There doesn't have to be a dependence on the written word. It can be in ASL, LSQ, or an Indigenous Sign Language. So then we think about the rights of deaf children. CAD-ASC works alongside of local governments, federal government, to advocate for the rights of children and deaf people across the country, the rights to access sign language, the right to receive interpreting services as well. And one thing you have to remember is that one of the big pieces of advocacy is the Accessible Canada Act, the ACA. And you have to think, where did that come from? Has it already been there? When did the government write that? And the answers to that, you have to go back to the relationships at the national level to see who was around the table. So you think about the UN coordinating countries at the international level, and they wrote their declaration in, I believe, around about 2010. And that was the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And it is an incredible document, and it does speak to the rights of sign languages that's included there. It doesn't speak fully to the rights of deaf people all over, but it does speak to full inclusion, full cultural and linguistic access. And it also talks about putting people who have lived experience of a hearing loss or being deaf in government positions, in positions where they have the ability to impact what is happening around them, and how people with disabilities in general have often been relegated to smaller jobs in darker corners, and how they really need to be spotlit front and center in positions of power and authority where they can actually make a difference in their spaces and in the country. Canada signed that agreement in 2010 when that declaration first came out from the United Nations, and has since started work on and integrated the Canadians with the Accessible Canada Act for Canadians. But you have to remember that Canada has different governments scattered throughout. And so there is the federal level, and the federal government is responsible for certain things. And then you have provincial governments who hold jurisdiction over other things. Therefore, when we think about the Canadian government establishing the Accessible Canada Act, that's only one piece. Each province also had to start writing their own legislation around accessibility. And we have seen that in British Columbia, we've seen that in Ontario and Nova Scotia most recently. It's coming. Maybe Alberta has, Manitoba has also started their legislation as well and gotten that into being. But again, you have to go back and think of who is responsible to educate those governments at the provincial level and at the federal level. And so we have done a lot of work with many of the provinces looking at supporting their projects, whatever they have underway for advocacy.
Can you pull it up?
An example will be from Quebec, where there is the new agreements and the petitions have been signed, where there's looking for support for recognition of ASL and LSQ as the language of deaf individuals in that province.
Okay.
So we've had that in other provinces, and CAD is able to support that advocacy work by spreading the word, by sharing that petition. We think about Newfoundland and the most recent court case there, where a family was, this is for Carter Churchill, the family where they were advocating for their rights for their child to have access in school. CAD was able to support and bring advocacy and attention to that issue. And they were actually awarded the Henry Vlug Award for the work that was done under the for the need for access in Newfoundland. One thing that WFD has done is to work in conjunction with the CAD. And when we think about the rights of deaf children,
The light.
there are many rights. And in the CRPD under the UN, we see those exact same articles coming up, the exact same rights being then emphasized for deaf individuals. And so being able to do that in the same way that the CRPD can do is pretty amazing. And so we look at this CRPD from the UN, and WFD is then able to bring that forward for the rights of deaf children to be able to say, you've already put this in place in one way, here we are putting it into place in another way. So we would like to have the recognition and respect that this work is exactly the same work that you have been doing. This is the poster that you saw in Frank's presentation that is the summary of the Declaration on the Rights of Deaf Children. I recommend that this can be used in a variety of ways when you are advocating in your local areas to either your municipal or provincial governments, your school districts, your school boards. You can bring this document in. It is an internationally agreed upon document that follows the UN CRPD that allows you to look at what children's rights are and the avenue of access to language. And so these are the rights of deaf children. This is elevating deaf children to the level they need to be at, which is the level of all children with their rights and humanity. So then what do we do? And how do we do it here at CAD? We are bringing education and awareness from our deaf awareness team. We send letters, we talk to organizations, and we have many individuals who are sitting around accessibility tables. So they are in different provinces, they are sitting around doing the advising work. We also have oh, I should back up. We have many government agencies that we partner with or have representatives in a committee or in an organization doing the advocacy work that is needed at those levels. I believe there is over 7,000 agencies here in Canada that the federal government has jurisdiction and oversight for that must have a council of individuals with disabilities. And so they are looking for consultants, they are looking for people who are willing to work with them on an accessibility committee, et cetera, where they can be a sounding board, if you were, for the questions that the organization might have on how to increase the accessibility of their organization and their front-facing, public-facing services. So we have 7,000 different companies who are looking for that kind of consultation and support. And so, of course, we're looking at different agencies and different government levels. And we are then able to share that responsibility with our provincial associations, our affiliate chapters. The capacity is growing, but we definitely want that homegrown skill set so that we're able then at the national level here at CAD-ASC to be able to speak to the federal government on federal issues. And so here at CAD-ASC, how we are trying to support the development of access rights across the country, looking at accessibility laws and helping to write some of those accessibility plans, accessibility programs, and we need your help. We can't do it as just a small group of individuals. You know your local areas better than we do. You know your municipal and provincial governments. You know the people in your area. The problems that are showing up, they need to be brought to the national level. And when they are brought to the national level, we find those similarities and find ways to advocate in a stronger manner. We are able to write concentrated letters that hit issues from across the country. We are able to then advocate on issues of national importance. And we're able to then, like as Frank said, bring that equity and inclusion to all deaf individuals so that they can be free to sign anywhere with anyone. And so I will finish with another video of Shauna Joint, our president, showing you thank you in 3 different sign languages. This is an opportunity for you maybe to learn a new language while you're sitting here watching this presentation. So thank you, merci, and miigwech. And so from me, miigwech, thank you so much for your time and attention this evening. Oh, thank you. And Frank, I'll ask you to turn your camera back on and join us. Richard, thank you so much. I missed you introducing yourself with a name sign. Richard, do you have a name sign? Oh, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot it. Yes, my name is Richard Belzile, and my sign name is like this. So crossed fingers like an R, your pinky fingers up, and it goes like in a Z. Well, Richard and Frank, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure all of us have learned from this presentation, But the primary takeaway is that deaf children need access to language. Simple and straightforward. The goal and the vision of WFD, CAD, ASC is to have that access to language. Bringing in those videos from Shauna Joint, just amazing to see that signed languages are different, even just within Canada. But to be able to see that from Frank as well as from yourself on those videos, just absolutely gorgeous to see how sign languages across the globe are working for all of us. If you have a question and you'd like to ask it now, you are able to unmute your video and ask that question in sign language, or we do have an interpreter available, or you can type your question in the chat. We do have one that showed up already. And the question was, has Canada signed on to the Declaration of the Rights of Deaf Children? I guess that would be a question for whoever knows the answer. And Richard's saying, I believe that'd be you, Frank.
I was actually going to say CAD may be able to answer that, as
I would have to say that it is different than the UN CRPD. That one required every country to vote and officially sign the declaration. And so each country was counted, and then the declaration was ratified at that point once the number of countries signing on had reached a particular number, and that's the UN Convention on the Rights for People with Disabilities. And so that one meant that if a country had voted for it, they had to respect what was in there. Now, for the World Federation of the Deaf, it's more of a declaration on the rights of deaf children. And that one is just bringing a summation, really, of what was talked about. Like Frank said, in 2023, there was the World Federation of the Deaf Congress, and countries there voted, and the declaration was ratified at that point. And so I believe Shauna was there, our president, and they were representing Canada and voted in favor of the World Federation of the Deaf's Declaration for the Rights of Deaf Children. So I don't believe we signed on to it per se, but we did vote for that ratification. So hopefully that clears up that process. But Frank, maybe you could talk a little bit about the process that how to bring a motion forward. And that happened in South Korea at the Congress there, to bring forward the Declaration on the Rights of Deaf Children, and how that would be different and what that process really looked like. Yeah, Frank.
Yeah, I can answer that. So now, globally, deaf individuals or governments combined, the total number is 3,840 people have signed on to the declaration. So I would encourage you now, please go to the website and sign on to that declaration if you would like to. Again, that is ensuring that deaf kids have a right to access sign language.
Oh, hopefully more people will get to signing that. And Frank is correct that it is an opportunity for individuals to sign on to this declaration. This can be any individual. You don't have to be deaf to sign it. It can be a hearing individual. Other non-deaf individuals can sign it as well. And so it is honestly just an opportunity. Of course, the Canadian government has not signed on to that yet. They have signed the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, which is their official UN document that they would have signed. But this declaration is a tool in our advocacy kits as we are advocating with our local and provincial governments in order to talk about whether that's health and human services, whether that's educational services, whatever it is. This is a nice summation of a document in one sort of easy page for people to see and read. Frank, anything to add?
Not for me.
Excellent. Our next question is from Heather. saying that Heather is working currently with Indigenous deaf children and policy in their work with the Provincial Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. Are there Indigenous individuals available to work with me? If that's a question that anyone can answer, because she is currently traveling right now. And Provincial Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services is an acronym here in British Columbia. The UNCRPD, Nairn Gillis, has also offered us, this is something to look up, the optional protocol where Canada signed in December of 2018. The points are included there to strengthen your position. So you are then able, if you're doing advocacy work, to look at the optional protocol and what you can do in order to make your advocacy stand out. Any other questions? If you're thinking about it, that's fine. I will add a comment from my own experience. It was a while back when I was looking at isms, like sexism, racism, ageism, all of those isms that exist in society. I was teaching ASL at a university, and the class of students was SLPs, audiologists, and they were wanting to learn. And so we started talking about deaf culture. And this is, again, audiologists. And oftentimes they are thinking that children are, they're born and they are frontline workers. They are the audiologists who are right there. They are the ones who are going to meet the family first. And so then I started to talk about autism, the assumption, and I think this was about 6 years ago. So I assumed that my class would know what autism was, and they did not. They had never heard of that ism before. And so, I was thinking that this is something that they would be aware of, whether this was from social media or some other kind of awareness campaign. And it just really hit me at that time that there's still a long way to go. These are educated folks in an educational program, and they are still unaware of access to language for deaf children could be done in a visual way. And so providing more workshops, providing more informational sessions on children's right to the access of sign language, and it is an ongoing advocacy work that needs to be done. It's like throwing a small pebble into a pond that is huge, and we're going to have to throw a few more pebbles before those ripples really get anywhere, but we are still looking at those rights to sign language for children across the country. Frank.
I just wanted to add to Tony what you had just said. WFD's position paper on the rights of families who have deaf children to have access to sign language very clearly illustrates that need to have sign language services provided, and that there is a responsibility for professionals working in the field to provide that information and those services, and that needs to be provided on an ongoing basis. So we do have resources and information, and we want that information shared with the community. Sometimes folks just aren't really sure where to refer someone, or they just do a referral for sign language, but there's so much more. Connection to the community, different organizations they could be referred to, deaf clubs. There's really A to Z that they could be referred to. So it's really important that that information be shared on an ongoing basis, because these professionals also have turnover and someone new comes in and may not have these resources. So it's really important to continue to share those and ensure that the resources are out there. That education piece for those organizations and agencies is really important. It's really important that that advocacy be done so that kids have access to sign language and have access to culture as well, because that's those two things are interconnected. And we really want to see that be provided, and then we see the well-being of deaf children improve greatly.
Fantastic. We do have another question from Annie asking, is there any information on how our AI, I'm assuming, Annie, that you mean artificial intelligence by that, that artificial intelligence may be able to support ASL in early years programming, especially in areas where ASL interpreters are limited. So is there something that AI can do to support ASL? Frank.
Well, I'm not sure I have a definitive answer. WFD has a number of experts and a working group of experts that are looking into AI and issues that AI can present, the impacts of AI. So that work is still ongoing. Hopefully, we will have resources developed. The board will have to, of course, review and approve, and then that resource will be shared more widely to members, and hopefully that can be used to advocate to government.
All right, Richard, any thought? Oh, Frank.
Well, I was just going to say I'm really looking forward to where this technology is going to lead us.
And we do see technology in hospitals, et cetera. And CAD-ASE is always advocating for inclusion of technology where a person on the ground isn't available, being able to bring technology in. But we are really behind as far as that goes. We think about languages is captioning, and that's good enough. But AI is growing by leaps and bounds, and yet it hasn't really quite gotten to the place where it can. Um, take the place of a human being in using ASL. There are the light labs that are working on reconfiguring hand gestures, finger movements, facial movements, etc. But we are in very basic places right now. You can see artificial intelligence starting to simulate finger spelling, but in the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to see a exponential growth, honestly, in this type of technology. And so come back to me in 10 years, and I'm sure we'd be surprised that we were even talking about this today. Thank you, both Frank and Richard. We have another question here from Kaylee. Do you have any readily available resources for teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing to utilize and bring forward to school boards to help when creating policies around educational interpreting, deaf education, access to ASL, access to deaf culture, etc.? So if you have any resources to recommend, I'm sure we would all appreciate that. Frank.
Yeah, WFD has ongoing work with a number of international disability organizations and alliances. So there is some information available in International Sign Language where we work together to develop resources, jointly develop resources. And it is educational resources we're developing. And there are fairly general resources that can be applied to different settings, different educational settings, so that deaf children will have access to sign language environments. So they're able to have a space where they're able to converse in ASL and develop their sign language. So there are resources available in the International Disability Alliance website. I can find the resources and I'll send it to DCS, and then DCS can share out those resources from there. So that is our work that we do to find those educational resources and ensure that the content is appropriate and also fits for deaf folks. There was one organization that does advocacy around people with cognitive differences being included and inclusion in that way. And we've been working with them to work on how exclusion for deaf people can look similar and how to support that inclusion. And, if you put one deaf person in a room full of hearing people, that's not actually inclusion. It's just them being in the room with hearing people. There's a lot of challenges that still need to be overcome for them to actually have an inclusive environment. And one of the ways to overcome that is to have them in a signing environment and to ensure that access to ASL is provided, and that will support well-being. So I'll share those resources with DCS.
Richard, did you want to add anything? No, Frank is 100% correct. The resources are there, but what is key is having an environment in which a child has the opportunity to learn from older deaf role models and language access. If when a child is mainstreamed alone without language access, without language models, then that's an environment in which they can easily disappear and fall through the cracks. And so when we're thinking about education and schools, we've been really lucky to have 3 deaf schools, 2 in ASL, 1 in LSQ, and we're able to refer children to those schools. And that works. And those schools then provide those environments, and the resources come from those schools. However, you're right, there are many different provinces without those same resources, and I would still encourage individuals to connect to the School for the Deaf in their province if it's available, find information, get information that way. It is the environment where there are other individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing who are using sign language. Who, I mean, even if you're able to get 2 or 3 individuals together, that's where you see inspiration. That's where you see growth. That's where you see children playing off of each other and learning language. Kaylee has sent another message saying that would be amazing. I am a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, and the advocacy and ensuring that my students' needs and rights are being met. And yes, to your explanation of inclusion, yes, yes, yes. The school board does not understand that inclusion looks differently for deaf students. And I would agree, Kaylee. Any response, Frank, Richard? Oh, if I think back to about 20 years ago, when I'm in law myself, and I had a disagreement, and this was with, we were in a disagreement with parents of a deaf child, and you could see the bias to hearing and speech. You could see that it was wanting to have that audiology done, that you want that child to use their voice. They never tested for sign language. They never tested for visual acuity or any kind of access through the eyes. It was or through the hands and eyes. And it was just like, just take this out of court. I mean, it's not a court issue if your child just had access to language. And so when we went to court, we argued for visual access for the child. And at that point, the school board said, this is incredible. This child is already passing. They're getting a C plus. They're able to read lips. They don't need visual access. But no, with an interpreter, with a deaf role model, with the capacity of an EA who signs, teach a child a language they can learn and that they can use regardless of all the isms like you were talking about. There's so many isms out there. The I guess you could say the oppression of sign language is really out there. So we really need to work hard in all of our meetings. We need to educate school boards. We need to start seeing people with open minds actually getting into these positions. And that may mean bringing a deaf adult with you. That may mean bringing an advocate with you, maybe 3 or 4 if the first 2 don't work. And just helping the hearing school board folks know that deaf people, quote unquote, have a voice. They have the capacity to raise their hands and make their points in ways that we don't always get to see exercised, but that could be there. Teresa did drop a note in the chat that Gallaudet University is one of the leading institutions in North America. They provide bilingual, bicultural resources. And so to look at the Learning Center for Deaf resources there, if you're looking for additional resources, Gallaudet Learning Resource Center has some of those available. It is online and it is from the US. But if you are looking at ways to bring evidence-based research to your school board, this may be the place to do so. It does look like it is a clickable link that Teresa has shared as well. And Richard's just saying, during my presentation, we were talking maybe about where to find resources for Indigenous children. I think that was a question that came up previously, and we didn't answer that question yet for that individual. Yeah, they were saying that they are working with Indigenous deaf children and developing policies in their workplace. And so just what could we talk to about around resources? And Richard's just saying, please contact Shauna Joint. She is an Indigenous deaf individual, and she is part of our board at CAD-ASC. We have 4 deaf women sitting around our board table who identify as Indigenous themselves as well. And so connecting, I mean, our board is just 7 people. So that's the majority of our board, bringing a strong Indigenous advocacy and perspective. So if you can reach out to CAD-ASC board, particularly Shauna Joint as our president, ask that question, and I'm sure they'll bring some resources back to you.
Awesome. Are there any other questions? Oh, I do see a question come in here. Let me look. Okay, so the question is, how can we impact on SLPs and audiologists and the curriculums that they study in their programs that would lead to legislative reform to include ASL? I have one person's sister who recently graduated from a Calgary university, and she said she hadn't seen anything about inclusion of ASL at all. Is there a way that we can change that?
I'll answer. It is a cross-Canada issue, honestly, and it starts at home. It starts with your local school boards in K to 12. It starts with your school districts. It starts with advocating in that way. Of course, they are going to test children for speech and hearing. They are not testing for vision and sign language. However, that's what parents can ask for. They can say, hey, I know you've done an audiology exam of my child. What about their vision exam? Can we have them tested for ASL? So just throwing the concept out there into the SLPs working already. You get your working SLPs getting challenged with these questions, that's going to trickle back into the curriculum. And so, yes, it comes down to the teachers, the EAs, the principals, the counselors, those IEP meetings where everyone's sitting around the table. Then you can ask, where's the deaf expert? Where's the expert in sign language? Why are they not here? Are they not providing service to my child? As a parent, I expected to see that professional here. Where are they? And so then as parents, really pushing for that around the table, saying, I want to see an expert in my child's language and my child's culture. Where are they? Why are they not here? Where is the sign language expert? Which is a way of advocating and a way of educating those around the table. You want to talk about equality and inclusion, then as a parent, you have the advocacy responsibility to get out there and have those conversations. It doesn't happen overnight. Unfortunately, there's no real answer, but to start raising this as an issue so that those people working in the field are confronted with it all the time, then you're going to start to see changes in the curriculum. You start talking about who knows sign language, who is going to teach my child, who is teaching my child sign language, where is their opportunity to have sign language with their peers. If you constantly ask those questions and become a thorn in the school board's side, I mean, that's my 2 cents, but that's where change is going to start happening.
And Frank, did you want to add anything? No. I think that, we had the response from CAD at the Canadian level, so that's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that there are so many institutions, as you say, across the country, Nicole, where this is not part of the curriculum, where ASL and deaf culture are not even thought of. And we can just start challenging with that, with the why. Why is that not there? I've had this through my entire 4 years of schooling and it's not there. And so, like I said, when I talk to the SLPs and audiologists, they are our frontline workers. That's where the medical system sends parents as soon as a child has been identified with any kind of hearing difference. And we really do need to see deaf professionals highlighted at the forefront of that instead of seeing SLPs and audiologists being the only ones parents are referred to, that there's a sign language expert that they're referred to as well. So parents have the opportunity to have their needs met immediately. Frank.
Yeah, I'll add something that's a little bit off topic, but it does relate back. WFD has our Congress that happens every 4 years. And it's a week-long Congress that we host. And during the Congress, there's a number of presenters, deaf researchers, deaf academics. They come and present to the Congress on a variety of topics. And there are 6 different commissions. And one of them is focused on education. There is a commission on sign language and deaf studies. So there's also those kind of larger commissions and then presentations under those larger themes. And it's a really good networking opportunity. So if you were to attend the next Congress, you would meet many folks in the deaf world, in academia, who teach sign language, who do intervention services for children. There are a lot of different folks there at our Congress. And it is a really good opportunity to go and collect resources and information. You can bring that information back along with, contact information so you can reach out in the future, and you could bring that back to your country, use that to advocate to government. And it's also a good opportunity to work together and learn from each other. So if you see a presentation and something has worked in another country, as far as advocating for the right to access a sign language, you can get that person's information, take some of the learnings they have from their work back to your country and bring it to the government. Get folks to reach out to these experts. It's a really good opportunity to share resources, share information, and network with other experts in the field in a variety of different topics. It could be health, work, whatever it may be. So the next Congress is going to be in 2027.
And where is that?
It's in the UAE, the United
Okay.
Arab Emirates. It's going to be in Dubai, or sorry, Abu Dhabi, the capital city. So that's going to be in 2027. So something to keep an eye out for more information to be shared. It should be next summer that information will start to go out. And hopefully folks will consider attending the Congress and reaping the rewards and the networking opportunities, and then bring that information back to your own countries.
Excellent. There is a link that has been shared by Teresa Fleming, just that there are some modules around ASL support services to check out. Any other questions from our participants this evening before we wrap up? If not, I mean, I haven't seen any so far. So here's your final chance. If you have a burning question that you would like to ask one of our panelists, here's the opportunity. These are amazingly knowledgeable individuals around the rights of deaf children. Doesn't look like anything's coming in, so we will wrap it up. Frank, any final message for us to take away? Oh, looks like we have a question that has popped up. Monica, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on. You just would need to unmute your camera. And just give me 1 second. I will spotlight your camera feed. All right, then you can go ahead. I am a deaf parent. I have deaf children as well. When my first child was born deaf, we didn't know that, and we were not offered sign language, and we've been advocating for our children ever since they were born. When our second child was born, her own individual, there was no sign language interpreter provided for her. She had to share interpreting services with her sister in childcare. Of course, they were following their licensing, and they said they could only have so many children in so many groups and so many adults in the room. And then when my third child was born deaf as well, they were also put in childcare, and they had to share the interpreter. They had to share access to language. So they were all not provided full-time language access in childcare.
Oh, Monica, you're just freezing. Just let you know you're still frozen for us. Okay, that looks better now. You can keep
Okay, and
going.
so I had sent multiple emails.
Oh, you've frozen for us again.
Advocating for my children.
Ooh, you're still freezing. Yeah, you're still frozen for us. Okay, yeah, maybe if you move, we'll be able to get a better signal. We'll just give Monica a minute here.
Yeah, sorry, just give me 1 moment. Hold on a second. I'm gonna plug my device in.
Okay. Okay, maybe while we're waiting, um, we're hearing a situation here where, oh, okay, yes, please go on.
So now, with my children in the schools, they are refusing to provide educational assistance. The interpreters are controlling, I think, the narrative there, and they're saying we don't need to, they're just one interpreter being the voice of both of my children at the same time.
Ủa sao chị để
Oh,
email
you've
của Gmail
frozen
đó không
again.
chịu vậy?
And I just don't understand the culture. They don't understand deaf culture, and they're still not getting the support that they need. So, I mean, it's been 6 years that I've been advocating for my children, and it just feels like I have to say the same thing over and over and over again for each one of them, and they're just not getting the skilled professionals that they need.
Oh, you've frozen for us again now. And you're still frozen.
What I would like, I have sent an email to you. I'm hoping for support. I hadn't heard anything back, so I thought I would just bring this discussion forward to see how we can move things forward as far as policy, law, acts in this country and in this province, because I don't want to have to advocate solely as a deaf parent of deaf children. It is exhausting, and I cannot imagine if the tables were turned and I just gave up and my children would suffer. They wouldn't have language, they wouldn't have access to their education. It's heartbreaking, really.
Did either of you want to respond, Frank and Richard?
Are you in British Columbia, Monica? As far as I understand, that the BC government has been writing and has passed accessibility legislation, but they haven't developed their regulations yet. And so it is very difficult when there are no regulations to point to, but those regulations will end up having a ripple effect. But it really is working with BC's Association of the Deaf, other deaf organizations to ensure that they are able to come and sit on an advisory council or advise the school district to say, this is how to change things. And with the government of British Columbia writing those regulations, I do believe there are deaf people around the table. But again, go to the World Federation of the Deaf website, look at the Convention on the Rights for People with Disability, the Declaration on the Rights of Sign Language for Deaf Children. Use those articles for advocacy for your children. And unfortunately, it's really hard and it is very slow. And maybe by the time your children graduate, BC will have legislation and regulation in place. When I think about the family in Newfoundland and Labrador, it took them 16 years of advocacy and they had to fight the system. I fought for 3 years in the court system to get advocacy for one interpreter. One interpreter. So, yes, it is important to keep advocating. It is essential to, bring in the media, demonstrate this to the world through news outlets, etc. Talk about the inequity of what is happening in the community and access for your child. Center the story on the deaf community, center the story on language access. You have 3 children. They want to be contributing members of society. They are generationally deaf, which is a blessing in itself. But tell the world your story. And I think that's really where my advice would come in, is tell the world your story. And it would probably help. It's not going to change things tomorrow, but your children have managed this far and so have you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any last minute questions that have come up? Okay, Frank or Richard, any last comments? Frank, did you have anything you wanted to close with? Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much to DCS, Deaf Children's Society in BC, and also Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. So thank you very much. As well, I'll extend that to CAD ASC for being an affiliate with WFD. It was great that we got invited to present tonight. I think it's very important that we focus on and center that deaf children have a right to access sign language, or the national sign language in their country. So that is something that they must have access to, and language deprivation cannot be accepted. That access to sign language must be in all aspects of their life, whether it be health, education, social services. Regardless of where they seek service, they should be able to access that in sign language. Additionally, it's really important that deaf leaders and professionals be involved in supporting and providing services to deaf children, to teach sign language classes, to train, to do training with doctors, nurses, folks in the medical field, to ensure that there's deaf professionals and deaf representation there, and that referrals can be made to different agencies and organizations, that community is part of a deaf child's upbringing, and they can develop that sense of identity through that. So hopefully after the presentation tonight, you can go home and think about how you can work together and advocate for access to sign language for deaf children. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Richard, any last words? No, just thank you, and thank you again. Thank everyone for taking time out of your evening to come. This is such an important topic. This is information that is integral to the work that you do and your children's education. And so again, thinking about the work that World Federation of the Deaf does, that Canadian Association of the Deaf does, and hopefully our message is that you will remember that deaf children are going to grow up one day, you know, and we remember people used to be told way back in the day that their children shouldn't sign. And now we need to take that finger and wag it at the government and just say, hey, government, you're not making the right choices. Allow these children to sign, allow them access that is free and easy for their education and their lives.
Great. So I think I'll wrap things up now. Thank you very much to the two interpreters that were working for us tonight. Additionally, thank you to Levi, who has been managing things on the back end on Zoom. Thank you very much to our two guest presenters tonight. Greatly appreciate your time and your presentation. It was very informative for all of us, very rich presentations that you provided. And the information and resources you shared is incredibly important and very powerful. It's really important that we continue to support each other and work together, not only in Canada, but globally as well. So finally, thank you very much and have a great night.